Hello everyone and welcome back to Victorians Exposed. Ghosts and spirits are a large part of modern culture, and it's not uncommon to see popular mediums travelling the country and performing to large crowds. Nor is it uncommon to see people like Darren Brown who try and expose the tricks and methods behind these performances. Whilst the history of ghosts obviously goes back thousands and thousands of years, modern spiritualism as we know it, including mediums and summoning spirits from beyond the dead, originated in the Victorian period. The roots of spiritualism lie in America, with sisters Kate and Margaret Fox, who rose to fame in 1848 by claiming that they could contact the dead. They did so by performing séances to small groups of people. They would summon the spirits and ask them yes or no questions. If they heard a large knock, this would be interpreted as a yes, and if they didn't hear anything, then this meant no. Today, this may not seem like much, but table rapping really was the birth of spiritualism as we know it. The craze spread across America, with more and more mediums popping up all the time. Eventually, someone had to offer something new. Over the next 30 years, spiritualism would evolve to include all manners of contacting the dead. This included everything from spirits writing messages to mediums being possessed by the spirits and fully formed spirit bodies appearing and walking among the sitters. At this point, spiritualism was incredibly popular in America, but it wouldn't be until a few years later, around about 1852, that the phenomenon would come to England. From this point onwards, hundreds of British people would explore spiritualism, including famous faces such as Charles Dickens, Arthur Conan Doyle, and even Queen Victoria. One of the ways in which spiritualism radically changed the face of Victorian culture was through its employment of women. Mediumship was seen as stereotypically female, and women now had the opportunity to build a career for themselves that would be independent from the influence of men. As mediums, women were able to travel the country and make a decent income, but most importantly have more control over their own lives. Even though the career was seen as feminine, the fact that women could achieve independence through mediumship did in some ways conflict with the Victorian ideals of femininity. So it's unsurprising that the career eventually became associated with a lack of virtue and sexual deviancy. In fairness, it's easy to see why séances, which were held in dark rooms and evoked high emotions, were seen as a good opportunity for a bit of flirting. And in some cases, it was even thought that the séances were just a front for orgies. Though that might be a bit extreme, what could be deemed as inappropriate behaviour can frequently be found in records of Victorian séances. Especially in the case of Florence Cook, a Victorian medium who claimed that she could produce a fully formed spirit body who went by the name of Katie King. In one of her séances, a sitter recalls how Katie asked her to put her hand inside her loose clothing and feel her nude body. Katie was known for being rather promiscuous around some of her male sitters and would often kiss them full on the mouth, and when they would ask if they could touch her, she'd often ask if they wanted a squeeze. When you look through recollections of Victorian séances, similar accounts of quite liberal sexuality can be found very easily. And this probably explains why female mediums were often subject to very intrusive physical examinations from their critics in the scientific community. Now, when you read the historical literature that surrounds Victorian spiritualism, it's very easy to assume that women were in the majority in terms of practicing mediums, but this isn't necessarily the case. In fact, the most successful Victorian spiritualist was Daniel Douglas Hume, who was famous for being the most popular medium never to be publicly exposed as a fraud. But it can be argued that Hume possessed all of the feminine qualities that were associated with mediumship, including passivity, a nervous excitability, and being particularly sensitive. Not to mention Hume's long hair, delicate hands, and excessive personal vanity. And it could also be said that Hume owed his fame to the possession of these feminine qualities, alongside the fact that as a man, he commanded the respect in Victorian society that women just simply didn't. Hume was famous for producing some of the most spectacular apparitions in Victorian spiritualism. One of his more famous critics was the iconic poet Robert Browning, whose hatred of Hume lay in the fact that Elizabeth Barrett Browning, his wife, was one of Hume's biggest fans. Browning even wrote a poem about Hume entitled Mr. Sludge the Medium, and it openly painted him as an egotistical conman. But as his career progressed, Hume was put under an immense amount of pressure to produce these spectacular apparitions under an increasingly scientific and restricted environment. Eventually, it became too much to bear, and Hume retired in 1871 due to poor health. But the golden age of Victorian spiritualism would continue all the way through to the 1880s. After this point, spiritualism seemed to fall out of mainstream popular culture, but the movement has always been able to attract a dedicated group of followers who have ensured that spiritualism and mediumship has endured all the way through to the modern day. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out the last episode of Victorians Exposed, and if you want to keep up to date with all of the videos on this channel, just click subscribe. We'll see you next time.